I'll begin by asking a question to all of you. Before that, I want to tell the audience that the idea was to have a producer's point of view, a distributor's point of view, a filmmaker's point of view, and a consultant, a PR consultant, and an OTT consultant's point of view. So hopefully we get a round kind of view from everyone. How is the landscape of Indian cinema changing today?
In terms of changing landscape, I think the biggest thing that has happened is people in the north are more open to seeing films from the south. I wouldn't say all the films, but there are films that are finding good traction in the north now. And now every filmmaker from the south need not think within the box of their region. If there is a potential for the film and the story, look broader and bigger. And I think that's a big advantage to quite a few filmmakers in terms of the scale, the markets, the available markets, and potential of the film.
In terms of period, there is a pre-Bahubali period and there's a post-Bahubali period. So thanks to Shobu and Prasad and Rajamouli sir, things have changed where the Indian film industry is concerned, and now we are making pan-India films with bigger budgets, which we were not doing earlier. Now because the market size has increased, more investment is going into films and there are more recoveries. So I think it's thanks to the Bahubali producers that things have changed now.
And are you also seeing, from a distribution point of view, this change happening across languages, or is it just the certain South Indian films or the big films that you're talking about?
So I don't think every film can be released in a manner like this. I mean, the subject has to be more universal. It cannot be regional. That can be released pan-India. So it's basically the subject that matters and the size of the film that will matter and the popularity of the actor also.
No, I think the landscape has become bigger, I would say that. And to have a joke on the other side, I think on the tremors in the north, and it's emanating from the south. So I think there's a rethinking that's happening in terms of overall, what is it that means pan-India? Okay, like for example, a film like what KGF has done or what an RRR has done. And of course, it started off with Bahubali. I think it's making. We were just talking off screen, saying that in Hindi, when you have to make a film, you have to make it across five states. So you come to a least common kind of a narrative. But now with this happening, okay, because KGF is again a very local story, but the emotions are very universal. So I think what is happening is at the script level and at a content level, people are forced to think that what is it that is connecting. And I think that's a great sign for overall cinema in India.
I would say, as an observer, I have felt OTT platforms have kind of started streaming a new reality for all of us. When it comes to pre and post-pandemic movie content viewing patterns are concerned, and also there is some sort of what do you call it, a globalized modernity. And the most interesting shift for me, I have felt that landscapes and content are the new stars. And that shift from actor-oriented, star-driven communication is slowly happening, and there's a lot of content-driven communication happening. And even the way marketing is perceived, even when you look at cross-cultural promotions, cross-language promotions, and how the language and cultural barriers are blurring drastically. And there's a paradigm shift when it comes to how even regional content, like how he rightly said, has been placed on a national or global platform for that matter.
So, Shobu, a question, though, like I said, all questions are for everyone. So, in Hollywood, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they get this kind of bad rap because, till then, a lot of these European influenced directors were making, films like Bonnie and Clyde, and all those films were becoming hits. But then Jaws happened in 1975, and Star Wars happened in 1977. And a tectonic shift happened in Hollywood because suddenly everything became about franchises. Of course, there are independent films being made, but largely, like today, of course, it's all tentpole franchises, Marvel. Do you think Bahubali has had that kind of effect on what we are seeing in Indian cinema today? or it is soon going to kind of bring about that effect?
What has happened is two things have happened. One is Bahubali release, but also what has happened is the OTT platforms have taken off in a big way. When Bahubali 1 released, there was no OTT. 2015. 2017 just started, OTT platforms started. And with the advent of OTT and streaming and films like Bahubali, large-scale films, I think there's become a split in the kind of content that we are going to see in theaters, where more content-based, smaller films are finding it hard to get people to theaters. Whereas a KGF or a large-scale spectacle films, especially if it's a sequel or a part of a franchisee, is seeing a larger pull to the theaters. It's becoming easier to pull. So I think these franchisee films have shown that it's easier to pull audience to theaters if you make a sequel or a based around the same world and continuing. So I think that trend will continue. We'll see more more of that happening, but it is still time-consuming process. It takes a while for these films to get made and thing. So it's not like it'll be prolific, but we will see. I think that will be the easier way to draw people to theaters, whereas the smaller films will find it a lot more difficult to justify a theatrical release. That's my reading. Yeah. So I think, yeah, to answer your question, I think franchisee films will be the way forward, in at least in. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Anil?
Yeah, so I mean, OTT platforms have opened new avenues for us, but I think good content films also, especially in the north, just before the pandemic started, were doing very, very well. They were, I mean, audiences were more open to new subjects, better subjects, and better made films. So quality, like the kind of film Suresh has made, Tumhari Sulu, did so very well, and I'm so glad I was a part of it. So content-driven films also had started doing very well. But now it's to be seen as to post the OTT invasion, how these films perform at the box office. It's too premature, but I feel it will settle down and audiences do want to see good content films also.
Shahid Kapoor had two back-to-back blockbusters, Padmavat and Kabir Singh before the pandemic. And so you'd think that had Jersey opened before the pandemic, would it have done a little better?
So you know what? I mean, fortunately, I was the distributor of Kabir Singh. And when I see both the products, they're different. The subject is different. So, I mean, an actor is common, but the subjects are different. So the release strategy becomes different, the marketing becomes different. So it all depends on the film that you're distributing. So I don't think this pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, because audiences are here to see films. They will come out, they will see films, give them good films, they will be there.
I was actually yesterday reading through what is happening in Hollywood. Like, if you see the actually it's one of the top 100 grossing films, apart from the Marvels and the Batman, there's a film like a Sonic, which is an animation film. So I was actually looking at what are the genres that have done very well. There are three prominent genres: action, adventure, horror. You didn't find comedy in it, you didn't find drama in it, nothing at all. We are all figuring out, but I think because it's a proposition of spending 5 hours and spending so much of money, I would rather go with something that is giving me assured. And that's why the mentality of a franchisee, for example, I know what I'll expect, I know what I'll get, and I'll be able to enjoy that. Audience is getting more control of watching films where they want to and when they want to. So I think it's early to say that only big films will work, because I think any film which connects emotionally will connect. And that only time will say, but I will just hold my thoughts right now saying that while there's a huge conversation that only big scale films, I think it's a matter of one film coming and changing it all. And the trend will follow. I think it's just about connecting with emotions.
But
So-
that one film has already released, Kashmir Files, which was a very small film.
Yes.
It's done wonders.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it just goes to show that you give a good content, people are there to see it.
When you just gave that example, your first film was theatrical release, Jalsa was on OTT. Could you tell us how that decision was made?
I pretty much used it to understand what this beast means, because Tumhari Sulu was theatrical, very new to it. Experiences like his came in and it did well. I mean, and I was very happy that it did well. It connected with people. when Jalsa was happening and the idea was happening during a lockdown and post-lockdown and all, it was a very conscious decision to go to a OTT. I wanted to understand what this beast is. Like, it's like this, there are wells where you're constantly putting things. Do they make a noise at all? Do they ever reach you? I was surprised because the amount of response that's come its way, it's been overwhelming. But at the same time, there are people who walk up to you and say that, "Acha kya you released in OTT?" Or someone said, "No, the sound was very good. You should have gone for theatre." So my call was very simple. My call was, I need to reach more number of audience. Jalsa is a kind of a film which will take a little slow burn for it to. Right now, with 40 big films alone from T-Series, I think alone in the waiting for release, will a film like this get screens? Sulu was how much, sir? 700 odd prints, I think, that time. Yeah, 900 out of 4,000 in the world of, and within 2 weeks, Padmavat was happening. Whatever we gathered, we had to prepone it. We went, raided, and came back. Okay, that's what happened typically. So yes, it's been overwhelming, but there is no, going to a theater and getting that live response for a filmmaker, there's no replacement. So makers like me are thinking.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I feel there's also been a very interesting shift. Like I have been part of films, the so-called larger than life films when it comes to Malayalam is relatively a smaller industry when it comes to spends and everything. When you compare a Minnal Murali, the marketing of it was up on top of Burj Khalifa and in Dubai. Netflix went all out with the marketing of it. But when you do a slow burner like an Arkarya or a Kala is an interesting case study because what happened with Kala is that it came out in theatres. Nayatu also came out in theatres around the same time. It didn't do so well in theatres because theatres were just opening up after pandemic, the second lockdown phase. But when it started streaming, it started doing well, though Kala was on a pay-per-view or a revenue sharing basis. And I feel filmmakers have also become a lot more experimental with their concepts and plots thanks to the OTT surge and all the formulaic rules laid down by the industry, the tested age-old norms are getting redefined. And even when I look at the shift, like these sequels, even Drishyam had a Drishyam 2, one of the Malayalam films, Mohanlal acted in it. Drishyam 2 had a direct-to-digital thing, but it did really well there. And there is this interesting shift from newspaper inserts to a Burj Khalifa, which is happening when it comes to marketing. And there are films like a KGF and RRR and Bahubali or a Sanjay Leela Bhansali movie, for example. I go to theatre alone just to experience that, the magnificence of cinema, to get transported into that cinematic universe or whatever you call it. So theatres will stay because theatres 100% will stay, but I think just the viewing pattern and the choices of content is changing.
But what I'm really saying is, we keep talking about OTT theater, but has OTT really penetrated the Indian audience that much that people are going to say, okay, this film I will watch in OTT, this film I'll watch in theater, and therefore that will change the fortunes of the film? Has the penetration really been that much?
Even our theatre penetration, the number of screens, we are heavily under-screened. We have pan-India 9,000 screens. I think pandemic, post-pandemic, they're saying quite a few. So the really, if you see, the penetration is very less. And the multiplexes are predominantly A-center multiplexes. Whereas if you compare it with an OTT, like today with Amazon Prime, and then regional OTTs like AHA, and Netflix is not, of course, not take that kind of pen, but Sony and all these regional platforms. I think the visibility of a film or the number of audience for a film, I think personally is much higher on an OTT and satellite, especially if you combine satellite. There's a lot more with this thing on a region on an OTT platform. If you're looking for number of viewers, I think eventually. Even now, I don't know the exact numbers, but if not now, very soon, OTT will have much more numbers in terms of absolute viewership. So that's for sure.
Absolutely, yes, because most of the platforms, I do consult for some regional platforms also. We do have players there in the market, they are on a subscription drive purely because they want to get in good content to drive their traffic to their particular platform, and they are considering outright buying model because at the moment they don't have outright purchase. Regional OTT players, I'm talking about Malayalam centric. So they are considering buying content just for the subscription drive, and I personally feel that once we have considerable amount of subscribers, maybe all of these platforms can shift from outright buying to maybe like how we have to pay a cube or to upload our films, we might have to pay them in the future. We never know.
No, I was actually, there was an Ernst Young report that's come out, and I was going through it, I think, which is purely pre-pandemic. Every year they come out with a media report, and what they say, I mean, they put digital as technically, I mean, it includes YouTube also and everything. It technically has reached half the television market size in terms of where they are. The changing, I mean, saying, I was reading that it's 4.5 hours the average Indian spends on a mobile. So I'm saying somewhere something is being consumed constantly. So I guess I won't say just alone OTT. The penetration of digital, which includes the YouTube and which includes platforms like Jio and all of it, their penetration has increased, because of which, yes, they are going to make sizable difference into the viewing choices that we have.
There are also platforms like TVOD platforms, the streaming platforms, not just OTT. Like even Book My Show has this. YouTube now buys content and streams it. One of my projects, Arkarya, was parallelly released on 8 platforms, including Book My Show and YouTube. Amazon also was there, but it was a non-exclusive deal which happened with the production house. So there are, if you look at a Great Indian Kitchen, it didn't have any takers in the beginning. It's a brilliant film, and Stream as a platform launched with Great Indian Kitchen there, but it did exceptionally well, and then Amazon came forward to take the film, and Amazon also has come up with this marketplace concept where a lot of regional players are there, and you can watch the film through their interface. They also give us Prime Video Direct, where we can run the show for them. They basically give us a server space and we can upload films. But content-wise, BR, just to answer the content space of it, like when I look at our language films, a Churuli or a Tingala Chanishtyam or a Bhutakalam for that matter, can be placed in any context, any language. So, and also I'm seeing all the movies are now being dubbed into at least 5 languages at the same time. And certain films, more than the Malayalam content, the platform is getting subscription from the dubbed versions. That's an interesting shift, number-wise.
So Malayalam films are being dubbed and...
Malayalam films being dubbed into Hindi and other languages. One of my recent releases had that stats, very interesting numbers, where the Hindi dubbed version draw more traffic to the platform and subscriptions.
When the television satellite invasion also came in, there was a similar talk whether television is going to take over, cinema business is going to shut down. Nothing of that sort happened. I think they all complement each other. I mean, the example would be KGF now. My business in the north, the Hindi version was not this much. I mean, we did an X amount. The sequel has done into 10 times. This is only because the base was set by the OTT platforms. When the audiences did not come out in the cinemas to see the first part, they've watched it over and over again on the OTT or on the satellite, and that has created the base for the sequel. So I think when you get to see a film, not maybe in the cinema, because the cinema exposure could be maybe a couple of weeks. After that, you get to see on these platforms, that sets your base for your sequel. And that's how the audiences come and they know that there is a film like this, which is good, well made, like a Malayalam film. I can see it on OTT. Now I know when, until unless it wasn't released in cinemas, I would never know what the film is. So the exposure, the OTT base is solid. There's more viewership, more than the cinema viewership. It sets you a base. So I think they both complement each other.
Just adding on to him, like KGF, for example, after the first one, the amount of traction it got on these social media platforms, especially the TikToks, and where it was just about Rocky Bhai. Rocky as a character was built so much, and of course all the other things added on to it, that silently, that's what I'm saying, the digital base itself, rather than just an OTT, has made sure that overall the value goes up.
Now, I have a question. When you said that, they said the same thing about when satellite TV came out and that end of cinema and all that. But there was a big difference because there was a lot of time between the release of a film in the theater and the time that it released on satellite TV. So there was a long wait. So if I was impatient to watch a movie, I would have to probably wait for 3 or 4 or even 6 months. In Tamil Nadu, for instance, there's this tradition there used to be this tradition of premiering a film on festival days. So like a film would release maybe in June, but I would maybe have to wait till Deepavali to watch it on the TV, because that will be a special show or whatever it is. But now the OTT, it's giving you a film that you can miss in the theaters, watch other OTT shows in the meantime, and come back and watch it in 3 weeks. So that's why I'm saying, is that a slightly bigger transition of the landscape of Indian cinema? What I'm not talking about the death of cinema halls, but I'm just talking about whether OTTs have accelerated a process that's a little different than what happened with satellite TV.
So I think the embargo earlier was 8 weeks. It got curtailed to 4 weeks during the pandemic. It's again shifted to 8 weeks. So the wait is going to be longer now, which is required because that will help people to come back to the theaters. And if you don't want to wait for that many weeks, they do come to the theater. So that shift will happen all over again. Right now, the period is only 4 weeks, which is actually not too much. You're correct that people, even if it's running in the cinemas, it's releasing on OTT. So that shift is going to happen, that embargo is going to increase and it's going to go to 8 weeks. So that will help the theatrical business also.
Honestly speaking, I'm seeing it as a complementing. Overall, it complements especially in the franchisee model, where the OTTs and all that create that extra volume and even people who are not reaching and you're reaching out to them. The only sad part, purely from a director's perspective, is that someone the other day met me saying that, hey, I saw your film, I was in the gym. And then you made something and someone is watching it while doing a workout. It's not a great feeling. Okay. So the curiosity amongst an audience for a film, what it used to be to what it is right now, my point is that will it become like, the fast food mentality? You eat, you're eating constantly. But for bigger taste, you will go to a theater.
Yeah, definitely. These are both complementary. I agree with that. And there is space for both. There's an OTT and both complement each other. It's just that the bigger films will be able to attract footfalls, especially now it's become all the more because of the shortening window. It's become all the more crucial to get that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You need to get bums on the seat on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Otherwise, you can't have word of mouth seeping in, and then by which time, so that urge for the audience to go and see, and especially as a communal thing, it has to be a communal experience. It's a group of friends or family saying, we'll go to the theater and watch. If one single person wants to see it, he'll wait for that thing. So it has to create that communal aspiration. So I think both are complementary. It's just becoming harder for the smaller films to get that buzz, to create that buzz and pull audience to theater.
And I also think the OTTs are being aggressive in terms of saying, if the sooner you give it to us, the better the price we'll give you. So a lot of filmmakers are saying, like you say, see, anyway, the big weekends are definitely the first and maybe the second Friday, Saturday, Sunday. After that, it's slowly going to dip. So unless it's like a monster movie, I'm talking the average kind of movie. So why not give it in the third or fourth week? Because I'm getting a lot of money from the OTT. That's another way that the landscape is changing.
No, in fact, OTTs are renegotiating and saying if the film has tanked at the box office, they're coming to and saying instead of 4 weeks that we signed, we'll put it out in 2 weeks, we'll give you a few extra crores or something more. And I think that is creating a lot more pressure on the film to perform over the weekend and the first week,
How he was saying, there exist cycles, I feel. Like some genres demand that theatre experience, superhero genres or some larger than life films. With some films, you watch the characters at an equal pedestal. You keep them at par with you and watch them. But there is a KGF or a Rocky or a Bahubali you look up to. So it demands a theatrical experience and connected to memories, a sense of togetherness. You don't go to theaters alone. Most of us go to theaters in groups. So cinema is again a memory for a lot of people. We all have that attached memory about going to watch a particular film with a particular group of people, or there is an outing kind of a thing. So I had this professor in college who taught us cinema is dreams money can buy. So he was like, for 2.5 hours, you can escape into a world which you can otherwise probably not have in reality. There is this new wave which is giving space to a lot of new interesting content, experimental content, where we feel like one, we feel that sense of oneness with the characters, and such kind of movies are also existing. But I personally have felt from a marketing perspective, getting the number of screens and the desired show timings is very hard for smaller films. So that is a interesting shift that way.
Right. I remember this discussion happening when Abhishek Chaube's Sonchiriya was released. That a lot of people wanted to see it, but it was just the release pattern was so odd that the timings are all odd. Whereas I don't know which film was playing at that time. There was a bigger film at that time, and that was getting all the shows. So this is not a post-pandemic phenomenon alone. You know, Indian audiences have traditionally preferred star-driven films and films either by like with a director or by a particular scale or whatever it is. So I'm asking if there is a new director who has a very jalsa like concept, right? Earlier it used to be a little easier because things are also less expensive to kind of go and make a movie and kind of see, because there were also people taking chances on other kinds of movies. Now you feel that that risk factor is kind of decreased?
No, I think the first film can be a risk decrease. Like I was just, while this conversation was happening, and I realized that, see, it's the fifth week. It's released on 17th March or something like that, Jalsa. I still get feedbacks. See, that's the encouragement that an OTT and that platform allows, which theatre, I mean, for a film like this in a theater, I really need to be very lucky. Yes and no for your answer, in a way saying that yes, newer stories like Jalsa can be slightly risk-free, but then even the OTT platforms are learning that not everything can be put out here. Okay, you have to curate, you have to put in things. The risks are, I would say, safer. But at the same time, as a filmmaker like me, like what I'm planning next is I'm planning to do an action. And I'm wanting to do the action the way I want to do it. I am aiming at doing something theatrical. So while you're writing itself, you can bracket it. That's what is happening, right? These are curated audience. This is wider appeal. So that, I think, is in a good way for a filmmaker. I would not say safer. I would say that more number of such films will get made because there is someone who's going to showcase it nicely.
You're saying that OTTs are not looking at, they're also going to encourage these small, no-name kind of films?
Yeah, because I think what we've realized is every film finds its audience. And they have their, I mean, they never share their numbers, but you get a sense, see, very simple, in a small film like, in a space like, let's take example of Jalsa.
But Jalsa has Vidya
Yeah, it's got Vidya Balan and Shefali, all of it. But then there are smaller films which are there. I think what they've realized is there are audiences who will come back to a particular, when you specially divide it in, you see the genres here, action, slice of life, that's how they divide it. They want constantly content to be curated. What I'm happy about BR is that they're showcasing it very nicely. A small film will definitely get a certain marketing window. It will be pitched at the right places. Unlike where initially release ho jaye, bahut badi baat hai. Forget about marketing. Which I think gives a good positioning for that filmmaker, that film, everything. Yeah. So I feel it's a win-win for many.
I read an article in Variety where they said that the spectrum of subjects that Hollywood makes has shrunk drastically. That is, the people that want to make different kinds of movies, they have to really go and pitch themselves to, there'll be like a producer who'll come from France, there'll be a producer who comes from Belgium, there'll be a producer who comes from somebody else. So they basically collect little bits of money from various places and then make a movie. Whereas if you want a straightforward movie made, it's easier to pitch an action movie. For example, what what do you think resonated so much with people in a movie like Gangubai, which was a theatrical hit after the pandemic? That like people came to see it in theaters. What was the X factor? Of course, it had a big star. That there's no denying that. But beyond that, what was the factor that would make something like that a theatrical experience versus people say, okay, I want to go see this in a theater and not on OTT?
X factor is something that you can never judge. When a maker makes a film, he always obviously will be thinking he's making a good film. That's why he's making it. I feel any maker also, when he makes a film, he's making for a theatrical experience and not for a small screen, because when a film releases in cinema, you get to hear the buzz, you get to hear the noise, you get to hear the critics talk. So I think that is a satisfaction. Today, if Bahubali 2 or 1 had released only on OTT, I don't think anyone could have measured the success of the films. But when it releases in a cinema, you get to measure the success. You get to hear more talk, you get to hear a lot more. And that is, I think, a payback time for a maker. Yes, I mean, one should make films that caters to a larger section of the audience. Mine could be a good film, but it's liked maybe by a smaller section of the audience. So that is the kind of success my film would get. But if you cater to the larger section of our country, you'll get that kind of success. So it's the kind of film that you're making, and that's the kind of success you'll see. So it depends on what film you made.
So, Shobu, what are your, I mean, with Arca, are you also planning to make, let's say, medium budget or smaller films so
Yeah,
that you are?
Yeah, the big films are one-off films. You can't every time depend on a big film. You need a lot of things to come together. We are medium budget. Completely newcomers is a difficult hard sell, but artists I'm saying. But medium level, medium budget films, medium artists which who are few films old, is definitely what we're looking at. And I think that's because, again, say, top level, if you take the 3, 4, 5 heroes, they're booked all the time. And it's difficult to get, unless you have a fantastic story and a fantastic director and everything comes together, it's very difficult. So you need to work in that medium space to get it out. But the key is, we need to take a call. How much are we expecting from the theater? At least a number before we make it, because that defines how much money we can spend. What can we get from OTT and non-digital rights, and what is it that we are... so what's happening now is, many films we are looking at, most people, not just us, most producers, at least in Andhra and Telangana, they're looking at, okay, if we can recover our costs on this with the digital rights, and then punt it on the theatrical side, and then whatever you get it on the theatrical. That's the kind of balance that they're looking at.
I want to know when he's starting Bahubali 3. Can he just reveal it to us?
Whenever Rajmouli gets excited about it.
Just like how he was saying, there is this revenue structure which is different in each platform, and sometimes banners have to take a call. Like if an Amazon is coming forward and saying we'll take it for pay-per-view, but if a smaller platform is giving a price and taking it also, people prefer being on a Prime for the obvious reasons, because the subscription reach and the base and the follower base is stronger there. So placing becomes easier in that context. But there are also, like, I have worked on a crowd-funded film, like partly funded and partly crowd-funded, Madati, Leena Manimekalai's Madati. It's a Tamil film. It was my first Tamil film. It was streamed on a regional Malayalam OTT platform called NeeStream. But we did face a lot of hiccups while placing because NeeStream had a very strong Malayalam content audience after Great Indian Kitchen. So for a content like Madati to stream on NeeStream on a revenue sharing basis was really challenging when it comes to conversions were concerned. Because if you're selling a film for pay-per-view, you have to invest a lot in marketing. Otherwise, you just don't generate anything at all. So that is a very difficult call sometimes we have to take, because I'm seeing that shift when it comes to people taking tough calls, sometimes giving it to smaller platforms only because they want to bring that revenue back. And but interestingly, all the remakes and dubbings have also opened new avenues of revenue generation, I would say.
Yeah.
So that is a good shift. because earlier it was not as much. Because if I compare the last 2 years, we do get more calls from Bollywood or other languages for remakes or dubbing rights than how it was 2 or 3 years back. So it's a positive shift.
Anil, do you think remakes are still going to happen? For example, Drishyam before the pandemic was remade in I think almost five, 6 languages. But now when Drishyam 2 is released on OTT, there is they give the option of watching the movie in different dubbed languages. Do you think that's going to bring down the number of the remakes?
So I don't think so, because a theatrical experience is completely different, and our audiences, I think, look forward to going to the cinema. It's an outing for them. That is, I think audiences worship our films here. I mean, look at the kind of fanatical craze that we have in some states where actors are really worshipped. So they want it on big screen, and that shift is never going to be there, according to me. I mean, remakes are going to be made. Films are going to be, it's going to be status quo, I feel. It's just that they're going to complement each other, both the platforms. So it's going to be status quo, I think.
When audiences watch movies like and applaud movies like Bahubali or KGF or RRR, the one really amazing thing about these films is that they keep moving. There's always constant sensation. There's always something dramatic. So actually, if you look at it, a friend of mine called it the smartphone test. In theaters, he sees how many people actually, switch on the smartphones. And he said, when I was in KGF 2, there were hardly any, I mean, they recorded the entry of Yash or something like that. But after that, they were just like, he didn't see many. So do you think that way also we could be seeing a shift in the way films are made in terms of the pace of things like that?
Movie making always has had a face, right? I'm just saying there's a trend that's set for some time, then it goes off. Like for me, 70s was the time when Manmohan Desai, the legendary Manmohan Desai, Prakash Mehra, Ramesh Sippy, Rishikesh Mukherjee, they existed. And there were extremes of worlds. And of course, the popular ones were the bigger ones. My take is like right now, especially because we are coming slowly out of the pandemic, we are waiting for a trend to start, okay? But I'm not sure that, I'm not going to take it on face value that only this will work, because audiences purely, if they get monotonous about something, they're very cruel, yeah. They're very, very cruel. They will move on. They need tomorrow a comedy becomes a big hit. It changes the landscape. So I don't think so. Need to be worried. You asked me why we are, I think, positive. I'm just happy that the universe has increased, which is great.
Because see, we have movies like a See You Soon, which we can, shot on a phone, like Mahesh Narayan made it. And I'm not sure if you have heard of that film. There's a Malayalam film, See You Soon, which was shot on iPhone. And, this interesting shift when audience being very passive receivers of content in the past to they are very engaging now. We have a lot of user-generated content coming up. There's a lot of emphasis even when it comes to marketing. We give on user-generated reviews, the write-ups, detailed reviews and write-ups. The very reason why when I reached out to you, when I started off in Malayalam was placing our regional content on a pan-Indian or a global platform. That kind of a shift is happening. And I really, really feel that friends back home and my colleagues used to say, I think probably you're the only person so positive throughout the COVID pandemic, because I felt it was opening up a lot of new avenues. For artists, it was giving a lot of new platforms for young filmmakers, new filmmakers, new wave cinema, different treatments when it comes to cinema, and the audience, it's some sort of a democratization of communication or something. So that personally for me as a student of communication was very fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think that democratization of stars, for example, like Pushpa, Allu Arjun is not a star who's necessarily known in the north. It's like it may be through his dubbed films which were released in TV or something like that. But the movie became nobody cared that whether it was a star or not a star, or whether it was a Telugu star, whatever it is, they just went and watched it. Like it just became this thing. Similarly, Yash. I mean, when I went to watch KGF 2, and when rocking star Yash appeared in Chennai, I heard the kind of whistles that are reserved for the top stars, which is which is incredible in that sense of. So I definitely think that, or even on a slightly smaller scale, and I don't mean this in terms of talent, an actor like Fahad Fasil, for instance, has become a little more known in maybe among the cinephilic circles, not among the general public, but he's definitely people wanting to write about the sudden spurt of Malayalam cinema, especially got a huge bump during
Absolutely.
the pandemic.
Just adding on to this placement of artists, my company also handles personal communications for stars. So one particular actor, he was telling me, I only want to be like a Yash to Kannada or a Prabhas to Telugu. I want to be a Malayalam actor who has a pan-Indian and global presence. I don't want to, be a multilingual star or an actor. I want to be the Malayalam actor only. It was a very interesting objective he gave me to achieve. And I think that way, that kind of, like I said in the very beginning, that blurring of boundaries across cultural promotions. Allu Arjun was in Kerala to promote. Yash was there. Like a lot of people come to our cities to promote their films. So which means they are taking regional cinema more seriously, and regional content has got that kind of a visibility nationally. And also because when I was in college, like a couple of years back, everything below Bombay was Madras. People used to call me a Madrasi. So I had to actually show them the map and say, you know what, there are 4 states and 4 different languages, stuff like that. So from being called to, generalizing of all the states under Mumbai to be Madras, to each industry having a strong, invincible identity of its own, I feel all of these new trends and the shifts in communication has really helped replacement wise. So very, very hopeful. And like how Agnes Varda, I was just telling Suresh about it. Once we get into cinema, like I come from a corporate communication background, once we enter it, there is no escape into it. From out of it, like we all, I feel, will live in cinema forever and beyond.
On that hopeful note, any final thoughts?
Especially for Telugu industry, we are extremely doing very well, very positive. I think industry is very upbeat. Whether it's OTT, theater, doesn't matter, we're doing very well. Just the OTT itself has opened up a lot of opportunities for new people. And I think the COVID people would not have survived. Many producers would not have survived but for the OTT bailing them out. So I think both are complementary, and it's a pan-India, as now that the whole India can be viewed as one market. And there's a lot more scope for people to tell a lot different kind of stories. So I think it's a great time. I'm very bullish.
Now we've started making Indian films and not regional films. That's a huge step forward. Indian audiences are liking this similar kinds of films, not taking into consideration the languages. So that's a very big positive, that we can have films from every nook and corner of the country and release it everywhere. So business is only going to increase. This is a very, very huge and a positive step.
I have decided to learn Telugu and shift there. No, jokes aside, I'm just saying it is, for a filmmaker, like for directors, it's a great time not to discard stories. You can always divide where you want to go in through, but it also constantly challenges you that how do you beat imagery after imagery when the standards are being set so high by imagery, especially from Hollywood and all of it. So filmmakers will be pushed to think bigger. Okay. Hopefully we'll crack it.
Absolutely. Just adding on to what he said, like movies like Bahubali has taught us to dream higher, push harder, no matter what the resistance, like to create new paths and to think the impossible and to dream the impossible. So I feel that is a power cinema gives each one of us who work in front of the camera and behind the camera. And I think that's the spirit we all take away from this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's reflected in the fact that an industry that is considered as making only small films, like the Malayalam film industry, is now making a 200 crore film like Barrows, which is directed by Mohanlal.
Absolutely. Yes.
This should have been very surprising to hear, in
The budgets, the marketing budgets I feel I'm a happier person because thanks to all of you, because I do get the budgets that I ask for nowadays. And also, like when it comes to placing it internationally, there is no resistance because they understand the importance of it. They understand how, at least there is even the old generation filmmakers, like there were movies like My Dear Kutti Chatan, which were made in the 80s, much before even I was born, which was a 3D film. And the shift from that black and white to color, everything we have witnessed. So now we are witnessing this shift from how marketing was maybe a small little thing which we used to do in the end to something which is predominant. Netflix, I hear, as per reports, 2.55 billion last year for marketing. They have spent, the reports have come out. So I do believe that our content, like how Anil said, it's Indian cinema now. It is not really fragmented. It has kind of unified all of us. Art has brought us all together, and I think we'll get through this.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.